Welcome to Paperbound Realms, where fiction isn't just something you read.
It's something you experience, explore, and have fun with. I'm Brian M.
I'm Frosty. How's it going, Brian?
It's going, brother. How you doing?
Doing well, doing well. Had a
Yeah,
busy, productive day, so no complaints.
absolutely. Yeah, you getting any further into your journey through Middle Earth?
Yes, I actually knocked out a couple of chapters last night before bed, and it was very enjoyable. I think
Yeah,
around 3 o'clock in the morning, I finally had to be like, okay, it's time for sleep.
yeah, yeah. I was messing around on Fable because I'm on I don't know, chapter 8 or 9, and
Nice.
Gandalf is still nowhere to be found. So I was just
Yeah.
sitting there he just didn't want to be the party's GPS. So.
Yeah, that's a good point.
But
Well, speaking of GPS, interesting segue. Let's talk about the direction of why we're here today and what we're talking about.
awesome. Well, I mean, we've got a lot of people where they're new readers or they're getting back into it. We've talked previously about some of the hurdles that people may run into and they've put it down for a while. I know you and I have
Yep.
gone through that where it hasn't been just days, weeks, months, it's been years
Yeah.
of breaks, and then something just kind of clicks or you see something and boom, you're back into the reading game. So we've been kind of putting our heads together and looking through our own little libraries and finding some books to help draw them back into the hobby and getting them reading.
Yeah. And even if you are a constant reader, maybe there's some genres you haven't explored yet, and these will help you too. Just
Absolutely.
sharing some of our personal recommendations of where you could start. And I love doing that to you every video. I love being like, so, tell me what's going on. And you're like, oh, I wasn't ready for this. No, I'm just playing. I'm just
Well,
playing. But
we were supposed to be reviewing tacos today. What happened? No.
it's not
Um,
Tuesday, man.
yeah. So, you want to kick it off?
Sure. Yeah, I have no problem with that.
Awesome.
I'm not going to start light, though. I'm going to come out the gate swinging. So brace yourselves. My first recommendation is going to be in the horror genre.
Okay.
It could technically be classified as several different genres, but for sake of ease, let's call it horror. And I'm going to go with Stephen King's It.
Mm.
Bold move, I know, because this is a huge book. This is almost 1,200 pages. It's
Wow.
no joke. But there's a caveat that I want to mention about it and why I chose it. If you are apprehensive about coming back to reading, but you do enjoy the idea of doing an audiobook, I want to highly recommend the audiobook. It's narrated by Steven Weber, and he does such a phenomenal job. Like, his voice doesn't vary a whole lot from character to character, but you really feel with his inflection and how he speaks and how he brings them to life that there is a difference with each character in the book, male or female, and especially Pennywise, the main antagonist of the story. So if you are apprehensive about reading, but audiobook seems less daunting, this is a nice long one. You can set in this world for a little while and just kind of enjoy the ride. It's very creepy. Not just in the supernatural front, because there are supernatural horrors, but it's also a good reflection of like a coming of age story and the traumas of real life, both from childhood into adulthood, and how they affect your mentality and your personality, how you view the world and others around you. So it's just a great story as a whole. But then you mix in Pennywise and all the weird things that he does and the way that he torments these children into adulthood. And I'm gonna tell you, it's hard to creep me out. I love scary things. There were parts of it I didn't want to walk like through my house with the lights off. I was genuinely like looking over my shoulder, grabbing a snack out of the fridge at 1 o'clock in the morning, being like, "Oh no!"
Yeah.
So it's a great story, both in the real sense and the fantastical sense. And if you've never experienced horror, this is a fantastic place to start because it's one of the best. It's
Mhm.
probably in my top 5 books of all time for very good reason. And like I said, if you want to do the audiobook, Steven Weber does a fantastic job. I can't recommend him enough.
Mm-hmm. Awesome.
What about you? What's your first pick?
Well, I wanted to actually just point something out. I know it's a
Okay,
little off topic, but
sure.
for those people looking to get back into books, audiobooks are a phenomenal way to do that. There are
Agreed.
some just as much as there is talented writers, there is some talented readers out there. And if anybody gives you guff, ask that person that's giving you the guff if they can read and drive at the same time. Spoiler alert, they can't. But anyway, I digress. My
That's a fair
first,
argument.
my first pick is News of the World by Paulette Jiles, and it was just a very just heartfelt um, story. You know, the basically one of the characters, and I won't go super in depth with it, but like he is a former Civil War vet, and he goes from town to
Okay,
town reading the newspaper. And the long and short of it is something happens, and he's kind of this girl is put in his charge, and she was raised by Native Americans,
okay.
and he's got to try to get her home. And but their story, the way that they end up bonding, it was just such a special, um, just a really nice story. The way that it was told, and then the the relationship that you as the reader develop with those characters was just really nice too. So definitely a nice read, and it's simple too.
Okay.
Not a crazy time investment. You know, it's just a pretty straightforward, just a really great feel good story, kind of steeped in a little bit of like historical context, which was nice.
That's awesome. It kind of sounds like a story like that could get quite emotional too, I imagine. But I haven't read it
Yeah,
myself, so I don't want to spoil anything for anybody
yeah.
else.
I mean, yeah. I didn't walk away feeling like that you would think with it dealing
Okay.
with a Civil War veteran and then some of the themes. But it really wasn't a there wasn't any like darkness. It was just genuinely like you felt pretty good. It did have some little somber tones to it, but I just
Okay.
think it's a really nice, well-rounded story to either start your reading journey or again get back into it due to that simplicity and some of those themes that you see in it. So
That's awesome. That sounds
yeah,
nice. Yeah.
yeah. So
Well, on to pick number 2 for myself. I'm going to dip my toes into some sci-fi. We have Children of Time by Adrian Tchaikovsky. And this is a book that was my book of the year for 2023. I have never read Tchaikovsky before. I did not know what to expect. It was amazing. I'm a big character person. I love character studies and really getting inside the head of somebody. And this tackles that in a very interesting way because the characters you follow may not all be human. Not
mm-hmm.
necessarily alien either, but it's very interesting. It kind of tackles the prospect of what if another species had human like growth and intelligence and perception? Why are humans the only one? And the way that it's tackled is very interesting. Kind of brings in the idea of should we try to be playing God? And it kind of takes you through this journey. And it's not super long, but it is this slow journey of this other species growth through communication and civilization and how they perceive the world around them. And then they're introduced to an alien species, which might be us. So we're actually the aliens coming to this civilization, and how that kind of throws everything on its head. And it's fascinating. There are parts that are super fast paced, and it tackles a lot of really neat topics that'll make you think. Like this book stuck with me for a while, and I still to this day recommend it to people. The beauty of it is a trilogy, so the process goes on further. Or if you just want to read this, it's a great standalone. You don't have to go any further. But I think it's a pretty decent foray into sci-fi if you're into that genre. Highly recommend it.
That's awesome. Yeah, that sounds very intriguing. I like that idea of like we're the aliens. So
Yeah, right?
it kind of spins that, that typical trope kind of on its head, which is kind of neat. Um, my next one, I'm going to juxtapose the previous one. So it was about a father figure, with a young girl. Well, this is The Road by Cormac
Oh
McCarthy.
boy.
And I read this. I'm gonna have to read it again because it's been a while. But as a
Okay.
dad, reflecting on this, whole different. It's a whole different narrative for me. So kind of a post-apocalyptic world, I guess we could say, and about the bonds between father and son. About
Okay.
protecting the ones that you love, and that throughout the story you're seeing the dad trying to teach his son these skills he's going to need to survive because he basically knows that I'm not going to be around forever. And then
True.
after you read the book and you really want to get kicked in the heart, then you can check out the movie with Viggo Mortensen, and it is just phenomenal. They did the book really well, but I would
Good.
definitely start here. And if, like I said, if you're a parent, especially a dad to a boy, it'll hit you a little different. So this will probably be on my more immediate backlog to get back into. So
That's great. You're gonna reread it. Just make sure you're in the right headspace.
yeah, right. It can be a little dark, but I don't think, without getting too spoilery here, I think that there was light in the dark of it.
Okay, good.
Because
Yeah.
it does have some darker themes, but if
Right.
you want to dig deeper and pluck out more meaning behind what's going on, if you want just a great story, it's there. But if you're looking for a lot of lessons and things to pull out of that literature, it's absolutely all over the book, which is super cool. So,
That's awesome.
yeah.
Absolutely. And you already touched on this a little bit, but I was going to ask. I've only seen the movie. I haven't read the book. So
hmm
you would say that the movie is a pretty faithful adaptation overall?
Overall, I would say they did a good job. And the
That's cool.
acting, of course, is just, it's amazing. And it's beauty in the simplicity, too, because there's not a
Right.
lot of stuff going on, and you're really focused on this relationship between, watching that evolution of the father and son,
Right.
so
Right.
that's what I just found so fascinating. I'm kind of like you. I'm very like character oriented, and watching them like uh evolve and overcome things where you're just like, how the heck are they going to get out of the
Right.
situation, sort
Yeah.
of thing. So really cool book.
Definitely. Sounds like it.
Yeah.
So next up for me is I want to recommend a fantasy book. And I chose one not off a recency bias, genuinely very strong regard for this series by John Gwynne. The first book is called Malice, and the series is called The Faithful and the Fallen. And the reason why I love this so much is there's a lot of fantasy tropes throughout this story. It is a quadrilogy. There are 4 books, so it's not a super huge commitment. A lot of fantasy tropes, but they still feel fresh. They don't feel like, oh, I read this 100 times already. It's still engaging, and there's still enough twists and turns to where you think, oh, the story's going to make this happen or that happen, and it doesn't. And it's quite interesting how he handles that tactfully. Um, it is very fast paced, so that's one of the things that draws a lot of people in, especially if you don't want to necessarily sit down for something like the Wheel of Time that's 14, 15 books, and like some of them can be very long and not a lot happens. It's very fast paced. Every few chapters is like a new kick in the gut. There's a lot of lovable characters, and you see their progression very early on. From the first book, you watch these characters go from some are naive and kind of unobservant of the world around them to
Mhm.
very gritty and weathered people by the end. Some in great ways, some in kind of horrible ways, but it's all just so fascinating to watch them evolve over the time. And yeah, the whole series is just kind of it feels like a high stakes bar fight,
Hmm.
bar brawl. Like it's just one hit after the other, and the way John Gwynne writes battles is fascinating and engaging, and every sword swing has weight to it and depth to it, and you're just kind of biting your nails, and the chapter ends, you're like, no, 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 I have to keep going. I have to read another chapter because you're not leaving me there. So
Right.
it's super engaging. I wouldn't be surprised if this eventually becomes a TV show because it
Mhm.
has that kind of capacity to it. And yeah, if you want to get into fantasy and it's kind of a new genre for you, where you're looking for something that's going to keep your attention and be rapid, definitely check out Malice, part of the Faithful and the Fallen by John Gwynne.
Super cool. I might have to check that one out too.
I
I
highly
think
recommend it.
we've had a couple passing conversations as you were going through that book, and it's definitely
Yes.
one that had me morbidly curious. I'll put it that way.
Oh yes.
Um, kind of a on that tone of TV and books, I chose Fire in the Hole by
Okay.
Elmore Leonard. Okay, so really cool. I don't know if anybody's seen the show Justified, but these books are what Justified is based off of.
Okay.
They did a pretty good job kind of nailing. If you've seen the show, the TV Raylan and the Raylan Givens you see in the book, they're pretty similar. There are some deviations here and there, but of course, adapting a television show directly from the book, you do have to take some creative liberties and
Sure.
things. Um, but I just love I love his demeanor. I feel like that's reflected. He's just kind of he's a, I guess in a word that you see in the show that's really reflected in the book, like you pull on me and I will put you down, sort of guy.
Okay.
Like, and
He's not here to mess around.
he's not. And he's just a very distinct individual, creative, and I kind of like the situations that Elmore has put him in. And then of course,
Okay.
if you do get hooked, I think they do a good job consolidating this. Where if you're just like, okay, I don't really want to go any further, you'll still have a really great story in Fire in the Hole.
Awesome.
But it is a series, so admittedly, I've not read through the entire series. I think I've gotten to maybe the third book,
Okay.
and then kind of broke off because my backlog is just massive at this point, and I'm a serial book buyer. Um, but great book, simple. Um, it's not something that you need to sit there and really heavily think about. It's just like for me, that book at the time that I was reading it had a crazy day, and I'm just like, look, I'm just gonna loaf on the couch with some popcorn and read my book, and that
Yeah.
was a perfect book for that.
That's the best.
Yeah.
That's
So
awesome. Yeah, I've not watched the show or read the books, but I'm honestly more intrigued. Like, the more we talked about it. 'Cause you mentioned in the previous video as well, so definitely something I'm interested in now.
he is definitely one of my favorite TV characters.
Okay.
Timothy Oliphant. He just is
Oh,
so.
okay.
Yeah, really cool. Basically, the premise was that he ends up shooting this gangster in Miami, and they send him back to Harlan, Kentucky.
Oh, wow.
And yeah, and so he didn't really want to go back there. And again, some of the things that you see in the show, what you're looking for, if you've seen the show, may not have everything in the book. There
Okay.
is a little bit of a differentiation that's going to need to take place, but it's not like way far off. So
Okay, cool. That's awesome.
yeah, yeah.
Well, back over to me. I don't know what genre I would technically put this book in, so I'm going to show it to you. Anno Dracula
Okay.
by Kim Newman. It's a little of everything. It's a horror, fantasy, crime noir. It's everything. It's everything you're looking for. It's set in the Victorian era London, and it kind of takes inspiration from a lot of other stories. There are a lot of characters from other works mentioned. So the Dracula in Anno Dracula is Bram Stoker's Dracula. and there are characters from those stories that make an appearance. But you're also going to find Mycroft Holmes from Sherlock Holmes. You'll find people like Inspector Lestrade from Sir Arthur Conan Doyle. And, oh, let me see here. I have a few written down because there's so many characters. There's literally a whole Wikipedia page based on the characters that make an appearance. There's Dr. Jekyll and Mr. Hyde, Genevieve, who's like a vampire-ess who is part of the story that Kim Newman came up with himself. And it's essentially a retelling or reimagination of Jack the Ripper and why he was motivated to do what he did. And you kind of mainly follow this detective who is trying to figure out who Jack the Ripper is, why he's doing what he's doing, while also kind of getting caught up in like a vampire revolution where vampires want to be seen as normal everyday citizens. But there's a lot of darkness that engulfs that concept, and people are scared for their lives because vampires need to feed.
Yeah.
But this honestly is one of the books that got me back into reading several years ago. It's fantastic. It's not always super fast paced, but there's always something interesting going on. And the way that it all unravels through this story is amazing. And it definitely concludes, but it sets up for a part two. And there are more books in this series as well, but it's a great mystery, horror, just wild ride. It's pretty fascinating.
Yeah, I skimmed that book looking for the Invisible Man, but I didn't see him.
Ha ha
Oh.
ha 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 ha. That was good. That was good.
No, that does seem like a really cool. I like that they bring a lot of those the horror themes and then seeing some of those big literature and movie names.
Yes.
Those classics kind of all coming together in one book. That's really cool. What
It's
was
a great
let's
blend of characters.
let's see the cover of that one more time.
Sure. Sorry about the sticker in the top right corner. We know bookstores like to do that.
Very cool. Yeah, I like that. That'll definitely be another one on my backlog, I guess. Every time I put a new book on my shelf, it's like, it just groans at this point.
No, I feel your pain. I feel your pain.
Um, I figured I've done an interesting job of putting a bunch of movies and TV shows and books together that I'd do another one. Why not?
Yeah, let's go.
In one of our previous videos, I was, kind of touching on the fact that Dexter, huge Dexter fan, big
Yes.
fan of the TV show. Then I didn't realize, I'm like, oh wow, there's books. So I read the whole series.
That's
Um,
awesome. Okay.
right. I will preface this where there are similarities in Fire in the Hole to the TV show and then some differences. There is a really interesting line they walk if you've seen the TV show between what you're getting in the book and what you're getting in the show.
Oh,
So,
okay.
without spoiling either, just know that if you are a fan of the TV show and you're getting into the book, some of the dialogue and stuff that they brought into the show, it's there. But there are some character differences. Um,
Okay.
and it's not for the worse. It's very interesting what they did.
Okay.
So
Okay.
I'll leave it there if you're really curious. It is a great book. It's dark. It's funny. There are some things, like the violence and all of that. It can be really heavy.
Okay.
So do be mindful if you do continue to go through the series. But I was it's again one of those just an easy breezy read when you're just wanting to be entertained, and I feel like they've just done a good job. Jeff Lindsay, Dexter is such an interesting character for somebody that's supposed to be like a sociopathic serial killer and all that. He's so dynamic,
Okay. That's
it
cool.
somehow didn't make him like super one dimensional, and then he's kind of funny when he doesn't even really mean to be. And then, of course, going through the series, I guess I will kind of spoil this one. I loved
Okay.
his brother in the TV show, and his brother
Hmm.
does take a much more prevalent role in the books.
Oh, okay. That's
Um,
exciting.
so definitely, a nice theater of the mind sort of read.
Okay. And it's pretty cool too because I'm also a big fan of the show. I didn't even think there was a book series until you and I
Yes.
started talking about it. So
Yeah,
it's really fascinating to learn that.
and the books too, like I said, they're a lot more over the top than
Okay.
than the books. So or the TV show. So
Right.
just remember that that deviation. Again, for me personally, I found it kind of another refreshing take on the character, even though,
Okay.
like I said, there was a lot of really interesting ways that they intertwined both.
Okay.
What the book is definitely more over the top and you know, than the TV show. But it's really cool though.
Well, let me get out the pen and paper, put another series
Yeah,
down that I need to
right,
read.
right, yeah.
Well, since we're still here, I have one more that I would like to talk about briefly.
Okay.
I'm going back to sci-fi. That's not to bore you, but I recommend The Expanse to literally everybody. I cannot sing the praises of this series enough. This is the first book. It's called Leviathan Wakes. Wow. I don't even know where to start. I really
Just
don't.
leave it there. Just wow, wow. We'll
Just read The
just
Expanse. Wow. Okay, see you guys next time. No, it's very clear early on. If you've watched a lot of sci-fi-esque movies over the last 30, 40 years, you're going to see where the inspirations came from, but that's not a bad thing.
right.
It also is kind of a dark noir mystery setting on one side, and it's very much a action-packed, guns blazing, but also like horror element type of sci-fi on the other side. So there's multiple POV characters, but there's two primary ones. You have the captain of a spaceship called the Rocinante and the crew that follows him. And then you have a detective who is Detective Miller. And they both have very different things happening in their lives right now, but their stories at some point kind of converge in a very interesting way. And you're not sure if they're going to team up or if they're going to be at odds. Are they going to get involved in a big shootout? You don't know what's going to happen, and the way it's handled is very interesting. Like you've been saying about the other books that have been turned into TV shows, they're very easy reads.
Yep.
It's a very easy read. It's a very fast-paced, fun. It's another character study. It does have a TV show. I'm not going to talk about that right now. Let's focus on the book. I've heard the TV show is amazing. I haven't watched it, but there are clear references to the Alien franchise, which is one of my all-time favorites. So that's brownie points for me. The detective mystery in the background is handled very well. For a sci-fi book, I was really impressed. Like, Miller could have got his own book to himself, and I would have been just as invested.
Yes.
And yeah, you really have no idea where this is going to go.
Right.
It takes so many twists and turns. It's absolutely amazing. By the end of the book, I immediately picked up book 2 and started reading it because I had to know where this went. Now, that's part of the issue. Some people are going to see this book and be like, cool, wait a minute, there's a lot of these. Yeah, there are 9 books in the series, and they're not tiny. They're kind of big. But don't let that scare you. The beauty of it is, like I said, they're all very easy reads. It's like reading a movie or reading a TV show where it's easily digestible. All of them are very action-oriented and character-oriented. And even though there is a long-going, overarching story, each book has its own vibe. So you might like one book more than the other. It kind of depends on the person. So the first book is kind of like that detective mystery slash high action horror sci-fi. The second book is a lot of political intrigue and a lot of corruption and trying to get away from a corrupt society and government and how that plays into the overarching story. And then you kind of shift gears again for book 3 and then book 4 and then book 5. You're kind of learning all the backgrounds of the characters and really getting to know some of the existing characters more and more. And it's just such a good series. I can't talk enough about it. And
It's not just a sci-fi, it's a space opera.
It
Like
is. It absolutely is.
you're gonna need one of the gimbaled seats from the book because you're just gonna be on the edge the whole time. Yeah, you got me into
Yes.
that series. I can completely attest that.
You're welcome.
Yes, and what and narratively, I just kind of decide track just a little. Narratively, it's cool because each chapter you're looking at this big story, big event that's unfolding through the eyes of that character. But then, a couple chapters later, you may be looking through somebody else's eyes from kind of a different angle at,
Yep.
and it is just riveting. It's fascinating, and I loved it. I loved the whole thing. So
And
good
not that there are
recommendations.
necessarily good guys and bad guys, but it does kind of give you that perspective of seeing the same problem, but from both sides of the fence. We're not stuck with just the good guy's POV.
Totally. I would. Yeah, that's a great recommendation. Um. All right. So my final book, kind of kicking with some fantasy.
Okay?
This is the rock and roll of fiction for me.
Yes.
The characters are just nothing short. I read this book months ago and I still think about these characters. They'll just randomly pop into my head. When I'm playing Baldur's Gate 3, I've made characters out of this book. And just to kind of get a rough premise as to what's happening with it is basically little uh, bands of warriors. What if they were treated like rock stars? And so these guys are they're friends. They were in a band for a long time. Something happens. They're older now. They got kids. Best friend comes in like, man, I need your help. And it's from there.
And they
It
band
is
back
just
together.
it's a hell of a ride. I will put it. Yeah, the boys are back in town needs to play in the background while you're reading that book. I mean, it is just fun. It's funny. It's action packed. The names, the characters. While there are some little fantasy tropes, it's not tropey in the sense that it's been redone. It's almost like a I don't even know if this really makes sense, but a innovation on the trope a little bit
Okay.
because it's
Yeah.
kind of taking what we think about certain characters or certain archetypes and kind of flipping them on their head just a little bit, where you're like, I did not see that coming.
That's awesome.
um,
Yeah.
but it's got a lot of attitude. I mean, it is just a really refreshing take on fantasy. While if you're a fan of like the Dungeons and Dragons and Dragonlance, you'll find character, certain things within that world where you're like, oh crap, that's really cool that how he threw that in there.
That's
Um,
cool.
really great book. Cannot recommend it enough. It's probably I'd probably say in my top five, oddly enough.
Oh, wow.
Yeah,
Oh, that's
since I've
cool.
been
Okay.
getting back into fiction, it's one that I will probably yearly go back to just because it's just so much fun. So
That's awesome to hear, man.
yeah, but
Well, I am fresh out of recommendations for tonight. Brian, do you have anything else? Any other books you want to share?
I actually a wild card that I was thinking
Oh,
about.
okay.
Because we were talking about different types of reading,
Right.
and for me, you may not want to start with a novel. You may not. You may
Fair.
just be like, look, I
Fair.
want to dip my toe in something that I can just kind of coast with completely.
Sure.
Comic books. Maybe not
That's fair.
necessarily, but if you're looking to just dip your toe back in without the crazy commitment, something that you can literally just sit back and just enjoy in little increments. This Daredevil Man Without Fear, Frank Miller that's been one of my favorite just casual, I'm eating breakfast and I'm just sitting at the table, flip through a few pages of it, and I'm still
That's
getting a
awesome.
great
Yeah.
story, really cool characters, and of course, with the imagery and stuff like that, it makes it even more easy and palatable. That may be your gateway. So I just wanted to throw that little wild card in there. My recommendations, that's what they are simply is they're just recommendations, but there's a whole other set of avenues that you can take to get back into it. And reading is good. Reading is
Yes.
your friend.
That's
So,
awesome, man. That's great. I didn't even think about that. That's a great recommendation, especially for somebody who might see it as a little daunting.
yeah, and
But
it can be at first. You know, if you haven't done it
sure,
for a long time, finding that right book to jump back into. But again, don't turn your nose up or steer away from audiobooks, manga, however you want to say it. There's so many great things out there, and of course,
yes.
finding people to follow, Paperbound Realms, or going to Fable or Goodreads and just investing yourself in the community a little bit. You may
Yes.
be surprised what you find. There's a lot of really great gold nuggets floating in the wide river of literature right now. So, um, but sticking strictly to fiction, I think that our recommendations are really solid. You've got me turned on to my Amazon wish list is going to get even bigger now. So thank you, Joe. but but yeah, so that was kind of my little wild card. Something that I was thinking about when I was putting my book list together is that there with technology, it does have some strength still, and
Sure, absolutely.
utilizing it. Yeah. So
I enjoyed the wild card.
yeah,
And hopefully, for those of you watching, if you're getting back into reading or want to explore a new genre, hopefully something that we recommended will spark that curiosity for you to be like, oh, maybe I should give that a try.
yeah,
And if you do try any of our recommendations, let us know. We'd love to hear about it. Or if you have recommendations for us, for maybe things that we haven't checked out,
yeah.
again, let us know. You can comment down below, or you can also find us on our social pages. I'm on Fable and Instagram as JRFrost Reads.
Yep, and I'm also on Fable and Instagram. You can find me at Brian Reads Daily. And I look forward to connecting with you all. And don't forget to like, subscribe, and hit the little bell icon so you can be notified when we make our next videos. And
It is
it's just
appreciated.
absolutely, and it's been awesome to be here again with you, Joe, to nerd out and talk books. Any sage advice for our viewers before we sign off tonight?
Sage advice. No, I guess the only advice I would have is just pick something up. It doesn't matter what genre, it doesn't matter the medium, audiobook, comic, novel, history book, self-help book, how to make money, whatever you want, just pick it up, give it a try, and see what sticks with you.
I love it. I love it. And it's never too late to start or continue reading. So
Very true.
until next time, we're Paperbound Realms. I'm Brian M.
I'm Frosty. We'll
Great
see
to
you
be
soon.
here.